All right. Welcome to the Columbus Rises for Climate, Jobs, and Justice rally. I'm Katie Clark, one of the organizers of this event with Indivisible Columbus, Georgia. Thank you guys so much for being here. For those of you unfamiliar with us, Indivisible Columbus, Georgia is a local chapter of a national grassroots movement to promote progressive values in our politics and instigate change in our government through action. We promote values such as environmental stewardship, better health care, and justice through action by actions such as contacting our Senators Isaacson and Perdue, as well as Representatives Ferguson and Bishop, hosting free monthly lectures, and holding events like this one. Today's event is going to focus on the effects climate change already has and will have on our communities, as well as the negative impacts of our continued use of fossil fuels and the potential positive impacts of using cleaner energy resources. We are honored to host this event alongside the Georgia chapter of Sierra Club and in solidarity with the national movement organized by the People's Climate Movement. Whether we like it or not, the reality is that our climate is changing and many people are already beginning to feel the effects. The reality is also that if we wish to diminish our impact on the climate, part of the solution is to stop using fossil fuels and focus on cleaner sources of energy. Our speakers today will start out by speaking to you about the predicted impacts climate change will have in our local community. From there, they will discuss the effects fossil fuel usage has on the climate, as well as the environmental justice issues related to them on local and statewide levels. Currently, many of the burdens that come from a lack of more sustainable energy sources and a lack of energy efficiency are placed on our most vulnerable citizens, whether in Georgia or in the larger international community. Our speakers will also discuss how more sustainable energy resources and more sustainable jobs can benefit these citizens especially, and present us with multiple paths to help create a cleaner, healthier world. Today, we're asking you to take steps to help us work towards that better world for us all. And we're asking you to rise with us for climate, jobs, and justice. Now, without further ado, I want to thank the speakers all for being here and introduce our first speaker. Troy Keller works as a professor of environmental science in the Department of Earth and Space Sciences at Columbus State University. He's with us today, not as a representative of the university, however, but as a private citizen who is passionate about science and its capacity to answer difficult questions. He earned his doctorate in biology at the University of Michigan, and his career includes working as an environmental science at the St. John's River Water Management District in Florida, and a research scientist at the Chesapeake Bay Program in Annapolis, Maryland. His research covers a range of sustainability-related topics, including conservation of aquatic species, development of novel waste treatment technologies, and restoration of aquatic ecosystems. He has agreed to share with us some recently published scientific research examining the environmental injustice of climate change for communities in the South. Please welcome Dr. Troy Keller.
Hello, how is everybody today? So, one of the things that we do in our department is we study things like big issues related to climate. And so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we know about climate, what's changing, what data is available, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about one specific science article that just recently came out that has huge ramifications for this region and the march that we're having today. Climates have fluctuated dramatically over the history of the Earth. These changes that we've seen, they've led from everything from ice ages that have literally locked up the oceans to extremely warm temperatures that have created huge land masses that were dominated by dinosaurs. So we've known for a long time that these fluctuations in the climate happen. But for the first time ever, we're looking at a time where we know that a single species, a hominid, us, has had a chance to fundamentally change our entire climate, and that's us. The data supporting this idea are unequivocal. There's no questions. The media may suggest, or politicians may infer, that there are problems and debates among scientists, but there are none. Let's be clear. Just to cite a few important recent trends. In May of this year, for the first time ever recorded, the planet has shown CO2, which is carbon dioxide concentrations that exceeded 410 parts per million. That concentration has never been seen on this planet in the geologic record over the last 400,000 years. That's 100,000, 100,000 generations of humans. This is a long period of time, and we've not seen these kind of changes. But those changes that we see, they have significant ramifications for us. Those changes have led to some of the most extreme temperatures that we've seen on a global scale in the last 3 years. So for instance, if you look at 2015, 2016, and 2017, not in that order, but those are the 3 hottest years that have ever been recorded on this planet. And we don't just take measurements in Columbus, Georgia. We're talking about measurements literally scattered across the planet. These are very, very important data, and they tell us an extremely important story, which is the climate is changing. Now, while we're all out here sweating out these changes, there are folks who represent us in other bodies, for instance, our politicians, who will tell you or tell us or try to convince us that somehow this is all a hoax. But we know better. We know that that is not necessarily true, and these are some of the things that we know. We know that the climate, we depend on the climate, and that the climate provides the environment which provides all the food that we eat. The climate prevents or helps move water across the landscape, which helps provide hydropower for us in this local region and all the other regions that use hydropower. It is the critical temperatures that help maintain our livestock and even the lives that we live. It affects how much energy we use to cool our homes, to move around in spaces. It is fundamental to everything that we do, and we cannot survive without it. So we know that climate matters. Today, we're going to join voices with folks around the planet. And our goal will be to talk about these issues, about how climate is not just affecting us, it's affecting everybody, and how those effects are really important. But I want to at least talk about one specific case study. And this case study is a study of the United States, and it's a modeling exercise that was done by a number of scientists in California. And it was published in the journal Science. Yes, science is real. And this journal is real. And the picture that the article actually paints is quite dystopian. This is not a picture that actually works really well in our benefit. So let me give you a couple of things that it suggests. The modeling went to the end of this century, and they suggested that if you look at what's going to happen in this region, specifically in the Columbus, Georgia region, one of the things that we are going to experience, these elevated temperatures and drier conditions are going to have a devastating impact on our agriculture in this region. That's our farmers. That's a big part of our economy. It's going to affect jobs. It's going to have a significant impact on the incarceration rates. It's going to have large impacts on health, on people's health. So all of these things sort of lead to a very significant outcome. They modeled all these different effects, many different kinds of scientists, everything from economists to social scientists, all together. And what they essentially did was try to estimate, well, what would those impacts be on something we all care about, which is the economy. And it turns out that these predictions suggest that in this region we'll experience somewhere between a 10 and 20% decline in our future GDP. That's very significant, and it's something we should all be concerned about. But it turns out that that same modeling exercise that they did shows that not all regions in the United States experience the same pattern. And if that's true, it's not just true here in the United States, it's probably going to apply to Europe and throughout Asia and, of course, South America and Africa. So when we start to think about this idea of climate and climate change, it's not going to affect everybody equally. It's going to affect some people more than others. And while some of us are going to have the wherewithal, the financial wherewithal, or the social networks to be able to adjust to these the changing climate, the most vulnerable in our population are not. And so this march is about that. It's about looking at people's jobs in the future. It's about looking at recognizing that climate is changing and trying to do something to help level the playing field to make it a more just society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Troy. Our next speaker is Valerie Haskins. Valerie has taught middle school and high school science and social studies to students in public schools in Georgia, and Florida and in Germany for the Department of Defense. She graduated with a Master's of Education from the University of Southern Mississippi and a Bachelor of Science from the University of South Florida. She is a lifelong learner, receiving numerous grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities. The latest grant received was from the Niall Macmillan Summer of 2017 Human Rights Program in International Educational Resources. Presently, she is running as a candidate for the Georgia State Senate in District 29 and working to keep a rock quarry from being approved for an environmentally sensitive watershed of the Flint River. Please welcome Valerie Haskins.
Greetings, hello. Thank you so much for being here today. This is one of the most important things we are facing in our world today. I'm Valerie Haskins. I'm a mother of 4, a grandmother of 3, a teacher, and I live in Manchester, Georgia. How many of you know where Manchester is? Up in Meriwether County? I love it there. I love the land and the people. We have the FDR State Park. I live on a little mountain. We have the Flint River, which is one of only 40 unimpeded rivers in this whole entire country. We have the Red Oak Covered Bridge. We have the Red Oak Creek, White Oak Creek. People come to Meriwether to bicycle. They come there to hike. They come there with their families to camp. The elderly, senior citizens, they like to retire there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Very rural. Something's happened though, and I need all of you to help us out. A big bully company with lots of money has come into Meriwether County looking at this quiet little place, and they see a big piece of granite. They want to start a rock quarry. They actually sued our county commissioners. Our county commissioners love this place. They really haven't ever encountered anything like this. This is a piece of land that's 700 and something acres. There are people that have bought their forever homes right next to where they want to build a rock mine. The White Oak Creek runs right through this land. This creek feeds the Flint River. This is a environmentally and ecologically sensitive water basin. This is something that should alarm all of us. I know we need jobs, but the top amount of jobs this quarry would make or produce would be 50 at the most. I want to bring clean jobs to Meriwether County. Sustainable, clean jobs. This is going to be devastating. It's a destructive industry. Some people say, well, we might need the rocks. We have got to learn to use less and be wise consumers. We can't just keep, we can't just keep exploiting every piece of land. This is big money talking. They're coming in and we have a big fight. And what I'm asking all of you to do, I have a flyer at my table back there. They have a website, a crowd justice fundraiser. They need money to pay the environmental lawyers. We need to get the word out. If you want to help, we need to make this so unacceptable to Columbus. You're our neighbors. Those people come down here and shop. They go to school down here. We are neighbors. And we just can't let this company come in here and destroy this land. And they want to rezone it from residential to industrial. So that's what I'm here for today. I'm fighting this. I wish you would pick up the flyer in the back, go to our website. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Valerie. Our next speaker is Barnetta Hayes. Barnetta is a former environmental attorney and champion of energy equity and healthcare access in particular, with a background in legal advocacy work. Her work centers on ensuring access to healthcare for all Georgians and increasing access to clean energy to improve the health and financial well-being of low-income families and communities. Please welcome Barnetta Hayes.
Hi there, and thank you for having me here today. I drove down from Atlanta and got to head back because I realized I double booked myself. So I'm going to be very quick. First of all, I just want to start out with the term energy equity. It is a term that a lot of people are not familiar with. We're very familiar with the term environmental justice. Well, energy equity and environmental justice are very connected ideas. Environmental justice is really focused on environmental pollutions and toxins and how they affect our air, our water. Energy equity looks broadly at exactly how the energy is produced and how the benefits as well as the burdens of that energy is distributed across communities. Energy equity looks at the importance of including all people in energy policy and decision making. So why is energy equity important? Well, increases in health problems related to living near polluting facilities to living in energy inefficient homes leads to more emergency room visits, more medical bills. It becomes a real significant financial burden on families. And in Georgia, where we have 16% of the population living below the federal poverty line, that's compared to 12% nationally. This is really an emergency in Georgia right now. To speak very specifically about energy equity and what it means, low-income communities disproportionately tend to be located near polluting generation facilities like coal-fired power plants. We're all aware of that. In particular, African American families are more likely to live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. This, as mentioned, can have significant overall impacts on community health as well as individual health. While that's important, it's also important to recognize that many folks live in energy inefficient homes, homes where their utility bills are sky high and are actually using more of that dirty energy than they necessarily would have to use if they lived in a more energy efficient home. They're using more heating, more cooling, because their houses are leaky, drafty, old homes that need a lot of technological improvements. So energy efficiency is just one of the solutions to the energy inequities we see in and around the state and to our reliance on dirty energy. It will help lower utility bills, provide more local jobs. There are 3,900 solar jobs in Georgia right now, and more than 230 companies. Improve community health due to less reliance on dirty energy. So I say all that to say, okay, well, what can you do to work in the energy equity space or hear more about it? Well, on October 13th, down at the Columbus Library over on Macon Road, we will be having an energy equity forum. It's free, open to the public, presented by Energy Efficiency for All Georgia, which is a collective of organizations of which I am a part. That's Saturday, October 13th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Columbus Public Library. There are flyers on the table back there. You can go online and register or sign up, or you can just show up at the door. The purpose of the forum really is to gather community members, utility leaders, community leaders, advocates in the community, to just talk about energy equity, tangibly how to save money on your utility bills and actually reduce your energy usage, but also how to bring solar to your communities and cleaner energy to your community to reduce your reliance on dirty energy, how to bring better energy efficiency programs to your community. So again, my name is Barnetta Hayes. I'm here on behalf of Energy Efficiency for All Georgia, and I want to thank you guys for having me here. My contact information is on the flyer, so if you are interested in attending the forum, which I would like to see you at, definitely feel free to reach out to me. Thank you guys.
Thanks so much, Barnetta. We're so glad you could join us. Real quick, everyone, before we get to the next speaker, I just want to remind you that we have t-shirts and decals back there for this event if you want to remember it. And we have some petitions that you want to sign, probably, to support clean energy in this area, in our local community. So just throwing out that reminder real quick. Now, without further ado, our next speaker is Marcia Gosier of the Partnership for Southern Equity. Marcia is a native of Fort Valley, Georgia, an activist, influencer, and strategist. She has organized communities in central Georgia to ensure convicted felons' rights are restored and they're able to vote. A former election supervisor, she's now the Central and Columbus, Georgia Just Energy Organizer for the Partnership for Southern Equity. Marcia is passionate about ensuring just, fair, and equitable policies for low-income and urban communities throughout the American South. Her passion about energy and environmental burdens' impact on low-income houses and people of color is the reason she's here today. Please welcome her.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Okay, you made me feel pretty important there, Captain. I appreciate that. Okay, so, is that better? Okay, so we're all here today about the environment and energy and how that impacts us, and more specifically, jobs. So when we speak to jobs in the environmental area and space, we want to have diversion and we want to be inclusive. And what we have to keep in mind is being inclusive does not mean that you're being intrusive. We have to change our thought process when we're looking at creating jobs. The most important space is being at the table to create policies. When you speak about diversity and how energy impacts low-income communities, just as Barnetta stated, if we look at the data and we look where they place power plants, they're often placed in low-income communities throughout the United States and especially in the American South. And this is by design. This is not coincidental. When I was talking to the young lady that's running for Senate about the rock quarry, it's the same thing. That is a rural area. And so they're going to come to those rural areas because a lot of times they are thinking that we are not abreast of the situation and what is occurring. And you have policies that are put in place. Everything is systemic. And when something is systemic, you're going to get the same result each and every time. So are you all familiar with the Public Service Commission? Raise your hands. Okay. So you know that their job is to ensure that we receive service for telecommunications, gas, electricity. They're supposed to ensure that everything is fair. They're supposed to set policies. But if you go to their website, it also says that they influence. And I think we're all aware that they probably do a little bit more influencing than anything else. So we are in an election year. And one of the important jobs that's on the table is for a Public Service Commission rep. And that's something that we all need to keep an eye on when we think about the burden of energy and how it impacts us. When you're at a point where you have elderly trying to decide if they need to keep their lights on or get their prescriptions, that is a problem, you see. And so we need to address these things and no longer just put them on the back burner. When we place people that have a heart for diversity and compassion in a policy-making area, then they're no longer just a place setting. They're not meat at the table. We don't want to be meat at the table. We're tired of being picked through and thrown away for the nice parts. So we can all band together and bring attention to these matters. We are actually having a Just Energy Summit in Atlanta, and I'll have some flyers about it. We would love to see you all. We have also established a presence here in Columbus with the Partnership of Southern Equity. Just to give you a background on some of our work, if you're familiar with the Plant B, the Plant Vogel, that's occurring, the nuclear site that they're trying to put into Burke County. We're offering assistance, and we've identified some attorneys to offer legal assistance to the residents there. So I just want to thank you all for what you're doing and bringing attention to this matter. And if we work together, we can make sure that we no longer just have equality, but we have equity and we have a stake in this matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. All right, so our next speaker is Luisa Ahern of EcoViva. Originally from Washington, D.C., she spent part of her childhood in Honduras, and in 2004 she returned there to co-found the Organization for Youth Empowerment, which provides education, leadership training, and capacity building to low-income children and young adults. At EcoViva, she oversees and implements the organization's strategic environmental and rural development policy, working closely with the organization's partners, governments, and multilateral institutions in Central America and the U.S. to promote and strengthen environmental policies and governance. Let's give it up for Anna.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Louder?
Good.
Louder. My name is Luisa Ahern, and I live here in Columbus. I work for an organization called EcoViva, where we work on environmental conservation and sustainable development in Central America. I travel to El Salvador multiple times a year. I also grew up in Honduras and have spent much of my life in Latin America. So I know what it's like there. I know what it used to be and what it is now, how things have changed. And it's a really hard place. It's a difficult place to raise a family and to provide for that family. In the last 10 years, a lot more people have left El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to come to the United States. And there's lots of reasons why. We hear about gangs, we hear about crime, violence, corruption, but there's another reason that we don't hear about enough, and that's climate change. This region, also known as the Dry Corridor, has suffered tremendously in the last 10 years. They've had more storms, stronger hurricanes, longer and more devastating droughts. In the last 10 years, farmers have lost over half of their crops. And this is also a very impoverished region, one of the most impoverished in the hemisphere. So farmers there, they don't have the income to install an expensive irrigation system when there's a long drought. They don't have a savings fund to draw from if they have a bad harvest. They don't have a backup plan. They live day to day, and when there's a bad harvest, they don't eat. They don't have enough food for their families, and they're forced to leave. In a survey from 2017, the majority of migrants from this region listed no food as their primary reason for leaving. No food. Meanwhile, here, our government is making matters worse for countries like El Salvador by rolling back environmental emissions regulations, by denying the realities of climate change. We are the world's second largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We are a huge part of a global problem. And we contribute to this problem that disproportionately affects those who've contributed the least. Countries like El Salvador, that contribute 0.03% of global emissions. 0.03%. And yet El Salvador is among the top 10 most vulnerable and at-risk countries to the impacts of climate change. Those that contribute the least suffer the most, and those that contribute the most are the last to feel the impacts. So here we are, a very, very big part of the problem that is driving people from this region. And how are we treating these climate change refugees? These people that are seeking asylum, that are fleeing poverty, starvation in their countries? Well, I'll tell you how. By persecuting them, by dehumanizing them, by separating families, by inhumanely detaining asylum seekers in horrible conditions right down the road at the Stewart Detention Center. And we blame them for their situation. We say, it's their problem. I don't have anything to do with it. Why should I care? Why should I treat them like human beings? Because we are a big reason they are here.
Nobody is stopping you from paying more taxes.
The U.S. has meddled in the politics of Central America for decades. Columbus, Georgia knows that very well. We have meddled in their governments for far too long for our own economic benefit and at the expense of the people from these countries. We've gotten richer and they've gotten poorer. We have devastated their lands, stripped their natural resources, polluted their waterways, and left them no choice but to flee and come knocking at our door. And we have the audacity to slam the door in their faces and blame them for the situation they're in, that we helped to create. We have to be better than this. The United States has to take responsibility for our actions. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. And we have to demand that they do something about climate change. Not only will it help our families, our future generations in this country, but it will also help people in El Salvador so they don't have to flee their country, so they don't have to come knocking at our door if that's what we really want. Let's stop making the problem worse and let's start being part of the solution. The communities I work with in El Salvador specifically are at the forefront of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. They are thought leaders. They are community organizers. They are shoring up their coastlines by restoring mangrove forests, by protecting their natural resources, and building a green economy that benefits people and the planet. There's something we could learn from them. Even the government of El Salvador has pledged to reduce carbon emissions. The U.S. has not. Instead, we're going to build more coal plants, keep burning fossil fuels, and roll back restrictions on polluters. That doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? Because America first? If we don't step up and take action, we're going to end up last. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anna. Now, our last speaker is, but certainly not least, is Bill Harlan of the Citizens Climate Lobby. Bill Harlan had a 30-year career in journalism. He then served 6 years as the communications director at a physics research laboratory in South Dakota. He retired 5 years ago and is now the president of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Columbus. He's currently working to start a Chattahoochee Valley chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. Please welcome Bill.
Thank you. Is this okay? Can you hear me? Good morning.
Good morning.
Is it hot enough for you? That was not a rhetorical question. Is it hot enough for you?
Yes.
If the answer to that is yes, the second question is a little more difficult. Is it hot enough to actually take some action, to do something about it? If the answer to that is yes, I've got one easy step you can take. Just turn around and look at the guy juggling behind you. That's my friend Henry. Thank you, Henry. So my request is simple this morning, and then we can start marching. Go talk to Henry and his friends. They've come down here from Atlanta to talk about the Citizens Climate Lobby, which is offering a unique, imaginative, and doable solution to some of our climate problems. Thank you for riding motorcycles. Maybe a Vespa. The Citizens Climate Lobby is a grassroots organization. It's It's got more than 400 chapters around the U.S. and around the world. They are nonprofit. They have chapters in Georgia, but we don't have one here. I'm hoping to start one here, and here's why. What they're proposing is a really unique solution. There's some details to it, but I'm just going to give you the broad strokes. Can anybody hear me with this going on? I can't hear myself. They are proposing a carbon fee and dividend. Please note, our friend over there, this is not a tax. It's a carbon fee and dividend. Well, what's the difference? Well, the government would in fact collect a fee on carbon like they do in many countries, including Mexico, Canada, most of Europe. But instead of keeping that money, they would return it equally to all households. So the effect of a carbon fee and dividend is that if you have a big carbon footprint, you're probably going to pay a little bit more under this solution. If you have a small carbon footprint, I know he's got more to say, I've heard it. We live right under one of those things. All right, he's done. If you have a small carbon footprint, which probably applies to most low-income people, you actually will get a little bit more back than you would pay in the extra cost for carbon. But the key to this is every year, it starts off low, every year this carbon fee would increase a little bit, raising in a predictable way the price of carbon so businesses and households could plan ahead. There would be some certainty that the cost of carbon is going to increase. So it's a market-based economy, and one of the key, a market-based solution. And one of the keys to this is Citizens Climate Lobby is working in a bipartisan way, and it's similar to Indivisible Columbus. Matter of fact, a lot of the techniques they use are similar to the techniques that Indivisible has been using very successfully here in Columbus. So and thank you, by the way, to Indivisible Columbus, Carolyn Weinbaum and Katie and Orm and Myra and Judy and some other people I'm forgetting for organizing this. Really, Indivisible Columbus has helped me retain my sanity, and I think that's something we can all agree on. I should remain sane. So the Citizens Climate Lobby is working with people across the political spectrum, including, oddly enough, some real libertarians, to introduce a true cost for carbon and naturally spur investment in alternative energy sources and in conservation. Now, in closing, I want to just Troy was great, and Troy really told you some of the true costs of climate change, and our other speakers spoke about this hammer really does fall harder on the people who are least likely to be able to afford it. But I think we really shouldn't be talking about climate change. We should be talking about climate chaos, because we have already reached some tipping points that we can't get back from. There are more tipping points to come, and some of them are quite serious, and especially for Columbus. We are the community that hosts Fort Benning. There are a lot of people down here right now who are serving, men and women who are serving in Fort Benning. There are a lot of us who are veterans. There are a lot of us who have families serving in the military, and all of us in Columbus have friends at Fort Benning. And climate chaos is security chaos, and the brave men and women in our military are going to be at the tip of that spear. So this is a serious issue. It's time to take action. Henry is not only juggling right now, but he can explain this entire plan in detail while juggling. So thank you, Indivisible, for hosting this event. Thank you all for coming. Go talk to Henry.
Thanks, Phil. All right, that's it for our speakers, everyone. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here today, as well as thank all our wonderful speakers, the organizations who came out to share information at tables with us today, the police officers who are keeping us safe during the march, our partners at the Sierra Club, and all our volunteers who made this possible. Please give our speakers another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
In just a few minutes, we'll be ready to march. Our volunteers will direct you to the correct side of the road, which will be that one, and they will help lead the march. And again, we at Indivisible Columbus, Georgia are proud to be putting this event on with the Sierra Club and in solidarity with the People's Climate Movement. We do have a sign-making booth back there if y'all don't have signs. Otherwise, you're ready. We're asking you to demand with us that Columbus seek to become a 100% clean energy city. We're asking you to protect the Flint River from contamination from the new rock quarry that Valerie mentioned. We're asking you to tell Congress not to confirm a Supreme Court judge with a history of favoring businesses over environmental protections and public health. And we're asking you to tell the President and the EPA that you want cleaner car standards and the Clean Power Plan to remain in place. We got a list of those calls to action back there as well at our booth. But for now, it's time to rise for climate, jobs, and justice. Thank you.
We're going to be lining up to march in about 5 minutes. Give everybody a chance to go make a sign that wants one, and then we'll be moving to the loft side of the street and heading south. We're just doing about a mile walk. So go make your signs, and thank you all for being here.
Down in your crowded bars, out for a good time.